The last month of 2024 had some really high highs and some really low lows. So let's discuss the books I've read during the month of December. Hi and welcome back, my fellow fantasy book lovers, or if you're new here, hi and welcome. My name is Kathy and I'm a fantasy book lover from Belgium. In today's video, I'm going to be going over all of the books that I've read during the month of December. And to get started, we have a book that I had really high hopes for. This is The Mirror of Beasts, the second book in the Silver in the Bone duology by Alexandra Bracken. This is a Arthurian-inspired YA duology, and book 2 takes off where book 1 stopped. Now, because there was almost a year between book 1 and book 2, I had forgotten quite a bit about book 1, except like the main character, of course. So getting into book 2, you don't get any synopsis, and I hate it when books do this. So while I did look up my past review and thoughts about this book with the notes that I made, I couldn't quite remember a lot of things about the first book. And if you get in a book and the first chapter just hits it off right, like it's the next chapter of the previous book, for me that's confusing. Especially if I don't read them right after the other. And that's a trend that I see a lot with duologies, and it's actually something that's going to hold me back in the future to start reading book 1 until book 2 is out, because this book would have probably had a higher score if I would have remembered a lot more from book 1 starting it. So if you want to read The Mirror of Beasts and Silver in the Bone book 1 as well, then read them right after the other, or don't leave more than a month of time in between them, because you will forget the details, and it's like a hit and run, the start of book 2. And something that also bothered me in The Mirror of Beasts is that we alternate between Tamsin and her brother, but you don't know that it's alternating because it's not stated in the titles or the chapter titles or anywhere. It's just like, so when you're reading, you're suddenly confused, like, wait, this is not Tamsin, and then, oh yeah, it's her brother with the other side of the story, and it's like very confusing. So that's also one of the reasons that I only gave it 3 stars, because it's just not fun if you have to figure out who you're following. Because I feel if as an author you are writing your books, don't assume that people will either reread your book or whatever. Just put a tiny bit of a synopsis so people know where you are, what's happened, what's going on, and where to start from that. People who have just read book 1 can easily skip the synopsis and just get into it. But for the people who have spent the time reading book 1 and have a long period in between before reaching for book 2, it would have been a lot nicer. This is why this book only has a 3-star rating for me. It was a very nice conclusion to the duology. I was left satisfied, but it was meh. It was not extremely good, not extremely bad, somewhere in the middle, and I kind of forgot I read this book, to be honest. After that, we have another 3-star rating for Flamefall. This is book 2 in the trilogy of the Fireborn or Aurelian cycle by Rosaria Munda. In book 1, we have this setup, we have this world building, we have dragons, dragon riders, everything. And at the end of book 1, we end off a little bit of a cliffhanger. And because I read book 2 fairly soon after book 1, I think there's only a few months between it, I still knew what happened in book 1 really clearly. And in book 2, there was a lot of setup with a external party, as I'm gonna call it, because if you haven't read book 1, this would be a major spoiler. So that external party is getting involved in this book more and more. So we have alternating perspectives from different people, and every chapter clearly states who it is like following. So I'm not gonna go too much into depth about what happens in this book. All that I'm gonna say is that we were working up to something and then they don't succeed, and I felt so frustrated by that, and that's the only reason why this is a 3 stars. The overall series I'm gonna talk about later, because I also read the final book of this trilogy later in December. After that, I actually read the Fairy Guild Trials. I don't know how I found out about this book, but I think it was through TikTok. And this is described as a fae fantasy with trials, which it has, and the female main character is the strong, powerful one. And the male main character, in like all of the descriptions and all of the teasers for it, is described as this like sunshine counterpart of her grumpy attitude, and she needs to protect him, etc. Which I felt is fairly deceiving. Okay, she helps him in one of the trials at the beginning of the book, but it's not because she needs to rescue him. Like, it's weird. I did really enjoy this book. The only thing that I regret is that there is no information at all about when the next books are coming out. So in this world, we have a faerie king, and when the king passes, the kingdom goes to the next in line, but there is no next in line, so they are hosting the Fairy Guild trials. So all of the fairies, you have the light fairies and the dark fairies, and for this trial, they have to like pass tests together. There's 3 tests that they need to complete. One is a maze, another one is something different again. So they have to complete all 3 of them, and the one that's left at the end that survives becomes the next ruler of the Fae Kingdom. That's the basic setup of this. We've had this 100 times in different books, but I did really enjoy it. I did enjoy the take on the different types of Fae. I really enjoyed that there was this kind of like neutral zone where they were like camping in between the trials and the interactions happening there. So not everything was as black and white as I expected it maybe to be. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I could highly recommend it. However, maybe wait until there's more books out, because it ends on a total cliffhanger, which is something authors often do to help you get the next book. But because it is like very abrupt, I feel like I would have wanted the next book already, and I hope it doesn't take over a year for the next book to come out. So for me, this was a 4-star read. Maybe with the next book, it would potentially become a 5-star series, but for now, I felt like wanting just that little bit more. I did love the main character a lot, so if you want a strong female main character, this is for you. And yes, this book also has romance and smut in it. After that, we had the book that I unfortunately DNF'd, and it was The Hemlock Queen by Hannah Whitten. I do actually own this book. It is somewhere on my shelves, but I don't want to pull it out. The main reason I DNF'd it is because I was 150 something pages in, and I just couldn't be bothered with any of it. The setup of book 1 had this love triangle situation going on, and in book 2, it's just like everything feels so muddled, is the best way that I can describe it. The main character is trying to get into her powers that she gets at the end of book 1. The other 2 characters really feel as side characters and not as the seemingly also main characters they were in book 1. I also felt like the vibe of book 2 was way more dark and doom and gloom than in book 1, although great things have happened in book 1 that set up for book 2. So I just didn't like the turn it was taken. And also because I did have a little bit of time in between books, I forgot kind of the ending of book 1. Well, I didn't forget about it, but it wasn't as fresh in my mind anymore. So they had to like do the cleanup of the situation of the end of book 1. And that's where it starts. So I was like, yeah, sure, this happened. That's why they're doing this together. It just, for me, it felt a little bit disconnected. Maybe if one day I feel like, yes, I really want to reread these books, I will read them together. I'm pretty sure there's a 3rd book coming out in this series as well. I love dark gothic vibes, but this wasn't that. I still love the aesthetics and the placement and like the way the characters are physically and stuff, but I didn't like the way they interact with each other in book 2. I didn't like where it was going, and then yeah, and one of the ways that my partner knows I'm not enjoying a book is whenever I start watching TV with him, then he's like, the book you're reading not good? And then I have to be like, maybe. I don't like admitting that I don't enjoy a book, and I also don't like quitting a book. So I spent at least 100 pages in most books that I read before I actually DNF it, because a lot of times I feel like you need to get into it first. But yeah, at 154 I decided enough was enough, unfortunately. Then I read a book that I don't have a physical copy of, that I just have on my e-reader. It is called Demon Hunter Academy by Traci Lovelot. This is part of a Why Choose Romance series. I've read the 3 other books that are actually after Demon Hunter Academy. So the main character of Demon Hunter Academy is actually the mentor of the girl in the other 3 books of the Vampire series that I'm blanking on the name, so I'll put it on screen with the image here. I loved the Vampire trilogy. I did also enjoy Demon Hunter Academy, but it's not a 5-star read. It's quick, it's easy, it has romance, it has smut, but because it's this school setting, for me it's a little bit off-putting. I don't like school settings, so it was a little bit of, it wasn't a struggle to get through because it read really easy, but it's not 100% for me. I gave this book a 3 stars rating because I did enjoy it. It was a quick and easy read, but it's not one of the better books that I've read, so that's why it's like in the middle ground territory of good, but not spectacular. And then we get to the book that saved this month, Furysong by Rosaria Munda. This is the conclusion to the Fireborn or Aurelian Cycle trilogy. And this was it. This book concluded the arc that we started in book 1, that kind of stagnated in book 2, but it needed the setup and the depth of book 2 to continue in book 3 the way it did. And I love these books mainly because of the female main character. And it's not something that I have very often. Most of the time I find the female main characters over-romanticized, overly pretty, oh no, look at me. But this one, yeah, if you want a strong female main character with like a poor background, growing up, needing to constantly prove herself, this is it. The dragons in these books are amazing. There is a lot of politics happening in this series. This has been compared to Fourth Wing, but Fourth Wing is romantasy. This is fantasy with some romance. The politics of Fourth Wing so far don't come nearly close to what Rosaria Munda does in this trilogy. So this is a 5-star. For me, the entire series is a 5-star because of how beautifully this ended and how well it was worked out. I did not see some of the connections that were made until they actually happened on page, which is something that is very rare for me. So if you're looking into a completed trilogy that could be read as a YA trilogy as well, I think this is actually a YA trilogy. There is some romance in it and there is some like gory details, but it's not like explicit content and it's not things happening in the chair of the throne room like there is in Fourth Wing. So this is actually a very YA appropriate trilogy with dragons, with intrigue that I could highly recommend even for adults. I cannot give enough praise to this trilogy. I loved it. And then the final book I read during the month of December is Servant of Earth by Sarah Hawley. This is one of the books that was gifted to me at the end of December, so for the holidays. And I had been wanting to read this book, so getting it was a very good excuse to actually read it that moment. Servant of Earth starts in a human village next to the bog that goes to the Fae realm, or at least they believe it does. The people from this village often see will-o-wisps and other creatures coming through the bog, but they never really interact with them. A lot of people have tried to go through the bog on regular occasions without any success that they know of. However, once a year there is a ceremony happening where a few get selected to go into the fairy realm and be taken in by them. Our main character is a girl who unfortunately doesn't know who her father is. Her mother passed away a few years ago and she is all by herself, and she has a best friend who she gets along with very well. She's not super young. I think she's like in her early 20s. I think she turns 25 somewhere in the book, and she is going through the bog and navigating the bog and like getting things out of the waters, and those artifacts that she finds and the money that she finds, she either keeps and buys things with that she needs, or she sells little like trinkets that she finds. And during the event where the chosen ones are actually taken across the bog by the will-o-wisps, her best friend gets chosen, but she doesn't. Now she decides she wants to see what actually happens in the bog, and she goes after them. So she follows her best friend, makes it across the bog, but because she wasn't selected, she's actually punished as she enters the Fae realm, and she's forced to become a servant to the House of Earth for one of their royalty. So she becomes the servant of their princess, who is actually due to enter trials. It's a little bit like coming of age trials. So from all of the houses, you have 5 different houses. There's light, there's void, there's earth, there's fire, and there's blood. Each house has younglings, as I'm gonna call them. They're actually already like in their 20s, but there have to be enough for there to be trials to be held. Every house has a challenge that each of them needs to complete, and if they succeed all of the trials, afterwards they get chosen or not chosen to be an immortal fae. If they succeed, they get full access to their powers, they become immortal. If they don't, they either die or they lose all of their powers. So it's very important that this princess of the House of Earth succeeds, and the human girl that we follow, her life also depends on that. I absolutely loved this book. The only reason I gave it 4 stars is because I know it is the startup of a trilogy. I saw a lot of the twists and turns happening, and one of the reasons is also that I want to see where it goes next. So the next 2 books might be very deciding in whether this is going to be a 5-star series or not, but I really love this book. So if you can't tell from the yapping I've been doing about this book, I've really loved it and I could highly recommend it to you. It is yet another fae-based story, but she's not skinny and pretty and perfect. She's absolutely flawed and I love her for it. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below which books you read during the month of December and which ones were your favorite, because I would love to know. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't already and you'd like to be, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week and I would love to have you for every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching and happy reading. Bye!